Larry, let me ask you, going way back, well, maybe not so far way back, we'll have to figure that out, but what is the earliest moment that you can think of or remember when you were interested in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, sure, fair. First, thank you all for being here. This is actually pretty intimidating. Especially Steven's like looking at me. I'm gonna make you happy. I'm gonna make you proud, Steven. That's my goal. I always tell the story that, I wasn't the entrepreneur that sold lemonade in his front yard or had a paper route. That wasn't how I started. I was the first kid in my family to go to college, and my parents pushed really hard to make sure that I went to school and got into college. And, in our house, I'd use this joke a lot. An entrepreneur was a bum, someone that couldn't get a job. That was, I remember the first time I told my parents I was leaving my, stable corporate job to go do a startup. And, the response was like, what are you doing? So my first early experience was, I went through the IMBA program at U of L. Suzanne's here. I went through it because I was working for an organization that had raised a Series A round and was starting to purchase other businesses. And again, I was told, to be successful, you have to check these education boxes. And if you want to be successful, go get an MBA. That's how you grow with the business, right? It does help a lot. And so I joined the Entrepreneurship MBA program because it was the highest rated, and I worked for entrepreneurs. So through that process, many of you know this from the University of Louisville, you go through this system process of starting a business. And all of a sudden, I realized there are a lot of things that already cross over with how I was thinking and operating in my daily business anyways. The ability to take risks, see new opportunities, forge through along with many others. And so that was the first, I was like, oh, maybe, and I didn't even call it, I still don't love to be called an entrepreneur, right? Just a risk-taking business person.
Okay.
I have a lot of awe and respect for entrepreneurs that have been doing it for a long time, and I see a lot of them in this room. But that was the first time that anyone called me an entrepreneur was through the MBA program, building a business out of that program.
Wow. So let me ask you this. With the EMBA program, I've heard...
Oh, no, it's IMBA.
IMBA, sorry.
Good
IMBA.
Adam,
Look, I'm already...
come on.
Oh, I'm getting the eye from Suzanne back there. Sorry.
Fort Center.
Yep. So what are the interesting... So I went through an MBA program as well. It wasn't the IMBA program. And so I've been told that experiences like the IMBA program, the knowledge base you get, the academic is very good, but so often it's more of the connections and the relationships you build through that program. What was the most valuable thing that came out of your experience there? Was it the academic or was it the connections? I mean, what was it?
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
All the above. I always say, B school is very theoretical, right? At the time, this was before the U of L made some changes, it was still set up very much for running a 1950s manufacturing business, which worked well because I worked for a manufacturing company. But I always say the things I took out of that was most valuable was critical thinking skills and confidence. Now, the connections, look, we're very fortunate in this community that the MBA program is very strong. We're typically everywhere, it feels like. It's our own little cult, if you will. So the network and connections are definitely strong and true. Beautiful thing about Louisville is that's happened across the board, not just with people I got my degree with. But I think out of that MBA program, I usually say confidence, critical thinking skills. You scratch the surface of entrepreneurship in the program. People are like, oh, there's all these things you don't learn in your MBA program. I'm like, okay, it's a 18-month, 20-month program. Like, entrepreneurship is a lifetime skill, right? There's still things I learned today. But it was the foundation and the base for launching my own business out of the program, which is how I started in the startup world. But just having the vernacular and be able to talk about the principles of raising capital and some of those other aspects.
Yeah. So you launched your first business.
Hold on. Right, Suzanne?
Yes.
Good. I'm looking for Suzanne to nod. Like, yep, she's saying the right things.
So you launched your first business as a result of the program.
Correct.
Do you think you would have done that without going through the program?
No. And wouldn't have started 3 other ones. And wouldn't be in the role that I'm in today.
So you'd mentioned before the confidence. Was it going through the program that gave you the confidence to do that? Or was it more, again, the academic background, or did the two go together hand in hand?
I think the reason I would not have done it without the program is, remember, I was set up with a box checklist from my family of what success looks like. You know, and like the final checkbox, honestly, was a corner office in Humana where you can see the rest of the landscape, right? Like that was what was going to define success. Now, I worked at Humana at one point, and no offense to my Humana friends, it sucked. Right? I mean, it just wasn't for me, but I didn't understand why. I thought it was me.
Yeah.
And so that was the main reason I probably wouldn't have done it. Now, who knows, right? What journey you go through. It could have been as I got my MBA and all this confidence and this knowledge, and I went back to work for the manufacturing company I was working for, I would have very shortly go, oh, based on what I learned, here's some opportunities and things that I could recognize that I could just build a business around and do this better, build a better mousetrap, have a better efficient process. That going backwards to my academic career that's the knowledge I got, was to look at things with a different lens.
So you talked about risk taking and learning and being willing to take risks. To date, what do you think is the biggest risk that you've taken thus far in your career?
Yeah, it'd probably be leaving that corporate job to go full time on my first startup. I was married. I had 2 kids under the age of 3.
Wow.
One with a severe heart condition that was born, at 24 weeks at home. And so leaving a job that paid me relatively well with benefits to go to a startup that won a bunch of competitions at an academic level, let's be honest, like it wasn't a real business yet. To do that was probably the one that was like, all right, let's do this. With the caveat that that's the first time I framed it that way. There's probably experiences in life where I made really huge risks that I didn't recognize just because that's part of my personality profile.
Sure.
But that was the one I could say I can identify and go, all right, there was that moment that I actually had the pro-con list and the thought of like, oh shit, what if this goes south? What does this mean?
Yeah.
But I did it anyways.
Yeah. So it sounds like you made this big leap of faith to go and do this at a challenging time, even in your personal life with everything going on. I was just reading an article the other day about the misnomer that you can really have a balanced life. It's hard to do that. You more counterbalance the personal work and all that.
Sure.
Going through, how did you balance your family responsibilities, your work responsibilities, and everything that's there through the midst of all that?
How much time do you guys have? I didn't.
Okay.
Let's start there, right? I actually had a great conversation with a founder yesterday that's working on mental well-being for founders. And I got divorced.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I didn't balance it well. Now, I'm also of the idea that balance doesn't exist 50-50 all the time.
Agreed.
It just doesn't work. If you found that, bottle that and sell that. I try to look at it like 80-20 one week, but it better be 80-20 the next week, the opposite way. So I look at balance that way. So early on, I didn't balance it well, made poor life decisions or poor decisions that affected my family. That was a hard life lesson to learn.
Wow. So
how do you follow up to that, man?
Yeah.
I was like, shit, how do I unpack this a little bit?
So within that first experience, you went on and started other companies after that. How did you leverage what you learned in that first experience to catapult you onto your next venture?
Can we actually go back to the mental wellness piece
Absolutely.
of it? I think that is something we don't talk about enough as founders.
Yeah.
Probably around that same time that life seemed, so I got divorced at the same time my second startup was failing. So it felt like the whole world was crashing down. It was crashing down. And I had networked with a group of peers that met on a monthly basis just to kind of talk through issues and problems. And that was my own therapy group, right? That was my group of peers who were also married, who also had children, who also were startup founders. And it gave us a great experience and a platform to just share the hard shit. Not just about like, I can't make payroll next week, right? Which is something we talked about a lot. But it's just like, I haven't seen my kid in 3 days, right? I miss my kid walking. Those things are real things you deal with as a founder with young families. So going back to the mental well-being piece, I think we found that was therapeutic for us. Because we were able to walk out and we would give each other advice about this is what worked in my family structure. This is what worked with my work structure. This is how it worked with my co-founders. And and since then, this is 2013, and since then I've tried to encourage all my founder friends that know me well enough, like talk to me about the things that are going wrong.
Sure.
What are the things that, you're not talking to your wife about? I made the joke to this person I was talking to yesterday that I have a founder friend whose wife calls me to find out what's going on in his business. That's
Wow.
not uncommon.
Wow.
You know, because it's really hard to talk to your, at least for me and this peer group that I have, it's really hard to talk to your spouse about the troubles at work, because it's already hard to think about it at work, right?
Sure.
So I think the important piece I wanted to bring there is like, find a group of peers, you know, share your problems. Like, this shit's hard. You know, make sure that you're recognizing that it's difficult and you have people in your life that you can talk to about those problems.
Did you know it was going to be that hard going into it?
No, right? Steve Jobs made it easy. Right? Mark Zuckerberg had a hoodie and fuck you flip-flops on. I thought that's the way it was supposed to be, right? Not as smart as either of those guys, but no, I mean, of course not. You know, entrepreneurship is glorified, you know, through Hollywood and through, you know, stories. You know, I've heard other speakers talk about the fact that those people just aren't humans. The ones that can work all the time and balance all those things. They're superhumans, right? They exist. So no, I didn't know it was going to be that hard. I was not prepared for it all.
Yeah. So before we get into what you took forward to your next
sorry,
startups,
that
no,
question,
that was great. But that, I think, brings up a very important point that doesn't get talked about enough. But what I'm very curious about, this group of founders that came together, was that an organic coming together? Was there like a mastermind group that was already meeting? How did that group come together to support each other?
It's like Fight Club, Adam. What's the first rule of Fight Club, Adam?
There is no Fight Club.
Right.
You don't talk about Fight Club.
So I mentioned so it was a curated group.
Okay.
It was a curated group, but it was it was curated by the group themselves, right? So
Sure.
It started off with a couple of us that had this idea, like, wouldn't it be cool to get together? Honestly, it started as, how do we get together and create new businesses together or do deals in Louisville together? How do we? And so it started off with this idea of business mindset, and it quickly turned over lots of bourbon and lots of nights out of, like, you know, the therapeutic mental aspect of
Sure.
it. So curated group, which I think is important because, you know, I think one of the big values of this group for me has been the majority of that group were men that were married with children and early stage startups. And so we had so much in common. It was just been, now we always joke like, you know, we're very blessed that we have each other as a friend group because we've had multiple of us that's been through multiple startups, multiple marriages, more new kids, and the groups really helped each other get through it.
And would it be fair to say that within this group, while you guys are all very close, it's also one of those things, if a person in the group is doing some dumb stuff or going down a poor path that they should not be going around, the folks are there and are going to stand up and say, hey, what are you doing? You need to take a look at that.
Sure, I mean, that's what friends do, right?
The good ones.
The interfriendship, right? Yeah, I mean, the beautiful thing of being a bunch of dumb guys sitting around a room with beer is you call each other out pretty honestly, pretty often. And so I think that, we've got a couple of the guys that are part of this group that have done some really dumb things, and we've had a lot of fun making sure they recognize they've done dumb things.
Yeah. You know, unfortunately, as humans, that's often the way that we learn the lessons the best, isn't it? We
Amen.
don't learn very well from other people. We tend to like falling flat on our faces
Yeah,
way too often.
And again, I think that there's a level of credibility that comes from peers that doesn't come from families or unfortunately, your family, right? Whether that's your spouse or whether that's your parents or your extended family, there's a sense of credibility from guys that or gals, of course, that are going through this process that just feels different.
Sure.
You know, often we've heard from spouses like, I told him the same thing, but he listens to what you guys talk about.
Yeah, for sure. So going from that first experience to the later experiences, what did you move forward and how did you do things differently or better within the subsequent startups?
Sure. So first, let's talk about what they were, right? So my first experience was an anomaly. I started through a class exercise in the EMBA program. We started a business based on a technology out of Auburn University that eradicated, shit you not, the hornfly. And again, Larry hornfly, like I could not have made this better. If you know about the hornfly, it's one of the most evasive insects that farmers deal with. And so we built that company out of a classroom in the MBA program. There, and I don't know if there still is. I think there is. There's a nationwide that has global attendance business plan competition network. So we competed on that network. And I remember when we first got into the program, like you could win $20,000 or $30,000. Well, we won close to $1 million. And with that came a lot of notoriety from the city. And so we had access to people and contacts in this community that founders just don't get. And I'm grateful for that, and I try to pay that forward as often as I can. So that experience was so unique. Now, we went from classroom to commercialization. We sucked at that. Now, to be fair, we sucked at enough that it's still going, and we did a $4.6 million Series A round, a majority of that being here locally. We brought in a world-class advisory board and board of directors, and it's still running and going, and we're doing things that we can talk about after this. But so that experience was very unique.
Okay.
Because that's not I've got an idea, I don't know anyone in the ecosystem, I want to go find out who can help me and who can invest. Like, that person's path is real hard. But with that being said, learned a lot, right? So I ran a manufacturing company. Running an actual company that has revenue that is stable or sustainable is a whole lot different than we just cash someone's check and there's no other money coming in for a while, and let's not go buy T-shirts and stickers all the time. But what I learned in that process was really like, all right, what's the relationships with board of directors? What does relationships with investors look like? What does relationship with the community look like? And so taking that, then during that process, I made really good friends with two people that I love just to say their names, Pascal de Châtelet and Cedric Francois, who really mentored me through this process. They had a human pharma company called Apellis, and unless you are rocking to the ground, you know they're a pretty big deal. But they were really kind and considerate, and they took me under their wing. Through that process, they had recruited this really smart guy out of Glasgow, Scotland, to move to Crestwood, Kentucky. And if you know Cedric, only Cedric can do this. And they kind of did a little bit of Match.com. Angus McLachlan was his name. I always joke, I worked with Pascal de Châtelet, Cedric Francois, Angus McLachlan, Renato LaRocca, and Larry Horn. Like, I was like, the token American, yes. But they were looking to match Angus up at that time with someone with kind of an operational background that knew the community, that could help raise capital. And so what I brought into that business was really kind of the education I learned from school, but also the education of hard knocks of running a business, and bringing a lot of that operational and kind of thinking about, hey, guess what? No one's writing you a $500,000 check on the first meeting, right? Or even a $50 check. So looking at the process of raising capital, setting up a business, and then pushing it forward, I think I brought a lot of that to that second business. And we ran that company for a while before it was purchased by one of our board of directors, where Angus went on to run it. And as we all know, it's spun it back out and it's continued to be successful. That business is called Liberate Medical. Wow. But it was a really interesting, unique experience to go through medical devices and the FDA. Jesus, if you're doing that, like, go get help right now. Go build your friend group, because that's no bueno. So that's the first one. Is that what we're going with?
Yeah, just some lessons you carried
tidal
forward.
Wave, man. Tidal wave. Make good partnerships. Be strategic with the people that you're partnering with. Don't be afraid to get no. I mean, I've probably heard no as much as most founders have now in my 4 businesses and raising capital. I think that you learn that and you just let this water off your back, right? I mean, no, and the former sales guy in me always says, no is like, is it no never? Is it no maybe? Is it no you just are busy right now, you want to take my phone call? What does no mean? And there are several investors in both of those companies that said no the first time and eventually wrote a check.
Wow, that's awesome. So you stuck with it until you got what you guys needed.
Yes.
Excellent.
Tenacity and persistence, right? That's a big part of it.
100%. So let's go ahead and pivot now. So I wanted to give good background about your story. So I want to talk a little bit about Techstars now. So you've been working with Techstars as a contractor now for, 2 or 3 months?
I'm bad at math, but since the middle of August.
Okay, got it. 2 or 3 months.
Yep. Sounds about right. What day is it?
I think.
What day is it? I'm not sure right now. Yeah, so I started working with Techstars. So this was... my last business I was in was a business called Roth River. And it was really about collecting data from the maturation process for bourbon. And what we found out is that if you put a battery-powered device inside of a flammable bourbon aquarium, it's hard. Not only is it hard, it's real expensive. And as that organization, we really pivoted to much more of there's a lot of data that exists on the life cycle of bourbon. I love talking about bourbon. I love drinking bourbon. And I think what we pivot to as a business is let's start scraping data across the life cycle of bourbon, use machine learning on the background, and create unique insights, and then build software on top of that. Nothing in my background suggests I would be good at any of those things. Right? And all the stories of all the companies I've built, I'm never the technical expert. I'm often the happy puppy. I'm the one that will paw on you or do other things to get what I need. So I would say that so when that company we came to this point as founders that it was time for me to roll off. Because again, you don't need an operations manufacturing guy if you're not going to have devices in the field in the near term. Money's always hard and tight in startups. So I was able, through the work that Techstars has been doing in Louisville since the beginning of the year, I was able to reach out to those folks and say, hey, look, I love this capacity building work that Techstars does. Is there an opportunity to work? And this is the time was to work for Techstars, as I refer to it, the mothership. And it was kind of like I got the proverbial holy shit. We just decided to open up a role locally in Louisville to support the efforts and double down on what Leap's been working on. And so I was very blessed to kind of roll into that position in a short period of time after coming off my startup, which is a hard challenge, a hard thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was the start of Techstars in early August. And then from there, the Techstars model, people have heard me talk about this before, right? Techstars, and this is the work that Leap's been doing, right? It's everything about the founder. Founder is the center economic engine of an innovation economy. And how do we wrap as much support services as we can with the founder as the focus of it? And, I got a chance to learn from the Techstars team that they've put together for that ecosystem development group is really just a world-class team. And so it's kind of funny to be sitting in rooms with them and having conversations about the work that they're doing and kind of feeding off that brain power.
So do you think Techstars was able to make a pretty significant impact here in the community? Where do you think that landed with the work that's been done here to date from your perspective?
Yeah, fair. I think the data says too early to tell.
Okay.
I think what Techstars has learned is our agreement. So some history on the ecosystem of dev group, we were city number 2, right? I still refer to us as a beta customer in some sense. City number 1 was Buffalo, New York, where they did a 3-year agreement for $4.5 million. Louisville did a 1-year agreement for $300,000. Still a significant amount of money. No one's going to frown. No one's going to take that away. What they learned is that model is but on a 1-year agreement. 1 year is just not long enough. The work that we're talking about, this is, if you've heard me talk about this before, complex systems versus complicated systems, we're not doing taxes here, friends. There's a lot of external factors that create and change the way that we operate as a community, and there's no prescription to solve that. Chris Hively, who's the head of that group, often says, success by 1,000 nudges. How do we do things in a way that push impact, push decision making, push founders to a place where there's increased collisions, and then focus on the things where their assessment of the community of things that we can improve on. A lot of that is transparency, trust, coalescence of groups. What are things that they could do? Now, some of that is just, again, I would say I did a survey a month or so ago. Several of you might got it, and the data comes back. It's interesting. The data numerically comes back as just like a perfect pie chart. And the questions were, do you feel like the ecosystem's better off today than it was 3 months ago? And 5 being like, it's about the same. So it was a good bar chart, or curve. Someone smarter than me knows this answer, but good bell curve. Thank you. That's it. We took out math classes in the MBA program for entrepreneurship classes. So that was some of the numerical data. Now the opinion data came back, really kind of 50-50 on this is a shit show. And I'm really glad that a global organization is here supporting our ecosystem, and that I see the impact they're doing, that it just takes time.
Sure. So with what you've shared here about, there needing to be multi-year and all that stuff, where are we in terms of is Techstars going to continue on? Are they done with after the current 1-year agreement? What's that look like?
So we're finished after the 1-year agreement. We had an effort of trying to pick up a second year. There's been some changes on a state level, as we all know about. There's some uncertainty from funding mechanisms. And then, it was just one of those things. I think like a good startup, I don't know if there was enough value created from a face value for people to kind of dig back in. So I think that, as Techstars has always said, that we're always going to be a node in their network. I've personally built really good relationships with those folks, and we've talked about how to continue the efforts of Techstars past their ability. And what that means is their ability to pay for people to travel in and be here, which, since they've hired me, has been relatively infrequent. And I think that this will come out, but beginning of January, we're going to have Chris Hiley come back into town and really do a little bit of a debrief on what their experience was in Louisville for the last year. What they think went well and what didn't go well, right? Because let's be honest, a lot of things, there's several things that did not go well. I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture here. There's things that they've learned a lot about their process along the way. And then there's just the Techstars mindset of ways as a community we can continue to move forward.
So just real quick, all the noise you guys are hearing, there's a big fitness class going up on the third floor. It's Shred 14's got a pop-up. So when we did this last month, we experienced the same thing. We're like, what is going on up there? So they're just having fun working out on the third floor. So the building's not falling down or anything like that. Yeah.
We should crash their party, go bring them beer and wine, and be like, you guys are focusing on stuff.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. With Techstars essentially not going to be here after year one unless something significantly changes that we don't foresee, does that leave a hole or a gap in the market? What kind of impact do you think that's going to have on the entrepreneur ecosystem with them coming in with so much fanfare and charge and all that, and then a year later there's not there? Do you see that? How significant do you see that hurting?
I think it's optics, right? I think that it hurts to see a national or global brand leave the community. I think so. There's going to be some optics pieces to that. I mean, the thing that Techstars always talks about is Techstars wasn't coming here to fix things. They weren't going to be the ones that made us change our culture and change our investment ability and change all these other things. They were really here to provide a platform and some suggestions, as a consultant does, to things that we as a community need to do. So, I mean, and I could be naive, and please correct me about this afterwards if you want to. I believe that what they've provided, and I hope we can continue to discuss, is a framework to say, what are these principles and how do we continue to apply them as a community? Because at the end of the day, it's up to all of us. It's up to the folks that are doing the work, that are in the startups, that are part of the development group, to kind of help move this ecosystem along. No one's going to solve this problem for us. Amen. Yeah, thank you. So I think so the whole is going to be, in my personal opinion, an optics hole.
Okay. So nothing of significance other than that, because optics can be overcome. It is significant, but it can go to overcome. Now, go ahead. Did you have a...
No, I'm going to say, so think about some of the work that Techstars does, right? And I think this is things that there's several of us that can be deputized to do these things already. I'm working with Jordan back there about how do we have a Louisville open coffee in the West End. That was something that came out of the Techstars mindset, but that doesn't require Techstars to do that. What it did is they, as a community and as a state, we fund an organization to bring a new perspective into town. We've gathered that. We've been doing that for the last year. And the work that Leap's been doing, the work that I was doing with Leap as Techstars, we've been doing that work. And Jordan knows I love him, but if Jordan doesn't want to do West End Louisville Open Coffee, that's not Techstars' fault.
Right.
And so I say that in a sense. So what has Techstars done? They've provided a lot of the money that we pay them. Everyone here is $300,000. Over 50% of that has come back into the community in the sense of events, and other activities that have focused on entrepreneurs. And so I think that that's the piece that people don't recognize. They say, "Oh, you paid $300,000 to this global organization, and they didn't make an impact." Didn't they, or did they? I mean, is there things that we've learned? Are we talking and speaking differently as founders and entrepreneurs about some of the things?
Sure.
I know I am. Now, granted, I was really close to it,
right.
But I know, Patrick's back there. He's been talking that way. I know there's other founders I've talked to about that the Techstars work that have gone through the program. Steven's back there. Those are the ways that people that we just need to deputize them and say, hey, look, these people aren't crazy. This is just a different way of running or looking at ecosystem development.
Now, you mentioned culture before, that it's ultimately up to us in our community to fix the culture, that some outside entity can't come in and just do that. I know you were working on a pledge for local founders,
right.
people in the ecosystem, to really get behind something, a common voice, a common vision, really to create a culture. How did that go? What was the reception of that pledge? What kind of feedback did you get? Where did that end up?
It's still going. I think that it depends on who you talk to, right? Just like anything else. There's people that love it because what we talk about is an accountability platform. A pledge doesn't solve any problems. It's one nudge. It's a nudge in a direction hopefully that we all want to go in. Signing up for something like this pledge just says like, hey, we all committed to work with each other and act with each other in a certain way. And if someone isn't working that way, we can kind of point back to that and say, you signed this. This is something that you believe in. Look, there's no blackboard, right? There's no we're not going to call people out who don't do the pledge or break the pledge. But what it does in conversation, instead of me going, Jesse, I'm sorry, you're right here. Jesse was a real jerk and he broke this, I don't like him, so don't do business with him. It gives us a platform to say, this is what we believe in as a community. And he is operating a way, and he's not, by the way, he's a superhuman. But he is operating in a way that, we, as a community, we said we didn't want to operate in.
Sure.
And I'd say that there's more to come on the pledge. We talked about it quite a bit over Startup Week. I think there's, again, going to be a big push in 2020 to have that be one element of a bigger things that we have to do as a community. But it's just one thing.
Okay, gotcha. Well, that's a good segue.
Sure.
So some news came out yesterday in the media that you were just announced
Here,
as...
let me take a bigger drink.
Yeah, there you go. Do you need some more?
No, I'm good.
No, you're good?
Galen,
all right.
keep your wine away.
Galen, you got some wine over
Keep
there
your
for
wine
him?
away.
But some news came out. You're the new executive director of Leap, moving forward. So what can you tell us about that transition going from Techstars into this new role, and how even some of the things you've talked about here as far as culture and some of the things, what that looks like? I know you're 2 days on the job, 3 days on the job, or something like that. But just to get a sense for that and going forward.
Yeah. Well, first, we can't start without a lot of gratitude for Patrick and Erica. They built a tremendous foundation for Leap. And, the thing that I can only hope for is to continue the momentum that's already been built as we focus on what next year looks like. There's no, and I've been joking with several of you around the room, there's no master plan that's coming out of this conversation today, right? It's day 3 on the job. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to learn about what Leap has been doing. I've been a partner with them through Techstars, but not into the day-to-day grind piece of it. And so I think that what to look forward going forward is kind of the version of me that I hope a lot of you have seen through our multiple dealings in the past, and I know a lot of you in this room, which is how do we collaborate together? How do we coalesce our community? How do we continue to speak as a collective to continue to move the ball forward? We have a lot of work to do, right? There's been a great start to that, but we still have a lot more to do. And that work will continue for a long time. And I think that as a community, as we look at leaning into story, leaning into other groups that are here, how do we as a community collectively get together and move this forward? Because if we operate in factions and we operate not cohesively, we're gonna go around in circles. So the work I look forward to doing with Leap going forward is, bring voices into the fold, figure out ways that we can work together, listen to the community, and then, devise a plan for 2020. I don't have that plan today. What I have is a desire to continue building our ecosystem. I love this community. I love a lot of these people in these rooms. I've worked with a lot of these folks for 10 years that are here. And I have a desire to see, what our community could look like when we work together and we continue to build.
So one of the things you talked about is listening to the voices in the community. When you envision that, what does that look like? Because there's so many voices in the community, to startups that are further along down the path, that are scaling, those that are the mid-tier, those that are just finding their way as well. Even the folks right now sitting in some basement hacking away at some idea that we've never heard of, but 5 years from now we're going to be like, wow, look at what these folks done. What is the plan to try and get input, or and again, you're 2 or 3 days on the job, right? But to hear
think
those folks.
Look, this is the work that I've been focused on for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
If you know me, I've joked about my work with Techstars, and the honor to do this work with Leap is I've been doing this work of talking to founders, being on boards of organizations that help move things forward for 10 years. Mm-hmm. I've just done it with 5 to 10% of my bandwidth, and I've done it buying bourbons and coffees. Mm-hmm. Now I get to do this full time, and someone was dumb enough to pay me for it, right? And I'm blessed to do that. So when I say that, it's do those activities. It's meet. I don't have the magic answer, but I'd say what does it look like to convene people? Let's talk about the activities. Let's talk about the things we want. The Techstars mindset of let's get together with a driving mission that founders are at the center of all the activity that we do. Mm-hmm. And then everyone else, not that they're not important, they're very important, but we ought to have the founder at that center of that mentality to move that ecosystem forward.
Sure.
So again, it's convene, it's talk, it's meetings, it's, most of I always say yes to pretty much any meeting I can get. They're getting harder these days, but I would say that I want to hear all the voices. And I want to see how we can help. Here's the rub, right? You don't make everybody happy. Right? So there's impossible to do all the things that everyone wants to do. So I've always said this in business for a long time. If we've got time and money to do 5 things and there's a list of 20, let's get a right group of people together and discuss what those 5 things should be, and let's do that together. Because Larry by himself is not going to, I'm not going to knock over any mountains. It's going to take all of us, and I ask for all of your help as we're doing this, and I'll invite you all to be a part of it in some fashion. So that's what I hope to accomplish in 2020.
Excellent. Very good.